Crime, as sensitive and dehumanizing as it is, still gets a lot of tongues wagging towards the direction of victim blaming. Could this be related to the fact that we live in a patriarchal society where in 95% of rape cases, women are usually the victims? And to follow societal expectations, women are expected to be more conservative and less sexually expressive than men. Hence, people tend to lean towards analyzing the situations she put herself into first and blaming her for finding herself in such situations in the first place, rather than focusing on blaming the perpetrator directly. Therefore, what is really the long-term and short-term repercussion of victim blaming in cases of rape and sexual harassment to the society at large? I'll give you some hints in the video. This is Just Jen Official. I'm Jen. Kindly subscribe to my channel if you've not. Turn on your notifications. Like the video if you like it. And I'ma see you in the video.
Yo, it's Just Jen. Yo, ha.
Back then in school, a friend of mine once told me that she went to see a lecturer in his office, and she met the lecturer at the door. There's the entrance of the office. Those days you see a lecturer, it's not always easy, so whenever you see them, just grasp them so that you can meet up with your target or do whatever you want to do at the time. So as they were about to go in together, the lecturer said, I'm drinking, so if anything happens, they are going to ask you that, didn't you know that he was drinking when you entered into the office? That was what the lecturer said. Of course, yeah, he harassed her, but the whole point was to express that there's a psychology behind an abuser having the audacity to say such to the victim. Hold that thought while I define blame and victim blaming. Blame is typically defined as a value judgment of the one who should be held accountable or responsible for or suffer from a negative event. Victim blaming refers to the tendency to hold the victims of negative events responsible for the outcome. Let's take a few steps back to the short story in the beginning. The psychology behind it refers to the compoundment of acceptable instances of victim blaming, of which every individual has access to. The human mind works in a funny way, of which it searches for every form of defense mechanisms, and when it gets one, tends to hold firmly to it and use it as a point of defense in given situations, including acts of crime. Okay, relax. I know it's a lot to take in at once, but let me try and rephrase it in simpler terms using an example. If Akpan always steals apples from Edith's bag, and every time Edith tells someone or the guardian, the person says, well, next time don't hide it in your bag. Edith later hides it in his locker, but funnily enough, anytime Edith hides it, Akpan is sure to find it and steal, and people keep blaming Edith for being too careless. The effects will go in two ways. One, Edith will stop telling people when it happens to avoid being tagged careless boy. Two, Akpan will expand his stealing territories and steal from other people as well, thereby expanding his victimization tentacles. 3. Akpan will grow more confident in his stealing prowess, knowing that people are likely to blame his victim for being careless. In fact, one day Edith confronted Akpan and asked him to stop stealing his apples, and to that Akpan retorted, well, if I steal it, that means you kept it carelessly and people will blame you for that. So that short story is very self-explanatory and applies to all spheres of life and criminal activities. Do not underestimate the power of the subconscious and what you feed it, especially now in the advent of social media and social platforms. When unfortunate criminal incidents are posted on these platforms, what are our reactions to them? Let's be cautious enough not to enable criminal activities such as rape and the likes, consciously or unconsciously. And I believe by now to a large extent that you understand that the effect of victim blaming being an acceptable act has its psychological negative effect and is detrimental to safety and individual security. check out the third effect of victim blaming used in the illustration between Akpan and Edet, you realize that Akpan's confidence level towards his criminal acts grew, and that is something we don't want happening. We want to crush their confidence level to crime, so they would realize that resorting to criminal acts like rape, among others, is not in any way acceptable. Yes, rape is a criminal offense, punishable by law, and so is indecent assault and sexual harassment. Some popular statements or scenarios used by blamers to accord victim blame include:
dressed provocatively.
First, I would like to say that the way a person is dressed has been proven to not be a motivation for rape and shouldn't be tagged as such. Rape is a conscious and preconceived act as much as every other kind of criminal act. So using a person's fashion sense against her as a proof that she deserved to be raped or sexually abused is a way of engaging the rapist, like in the case of Akpan in the illustration, and this is very wrong. Because we've seen cases whereby fully covered ladies were raped, even Muslim ladies with full hijabs were raped, as heard in recent news stories. What about the Westerners who go out in their bikinis in the summer and they haven't all yet been raped? How exactly are you going to explain these scenarios? Children being raped whereas they haven't developed sexually appealing organs? That is pedophilia, and it's a topic for a different video. But how will you explain this scenario? It is a conscious criminal act and must be looked at and taken from that angle. Another scenario used by victim blamers is: she went to his house or invited him over, so she asked for it. False. A person can visit another person without the intention of having sex. So that a girl visited you in your place or you visited her in her place is not an excuse, and people shouldn't enable such as being excusable for rape or any other crime. In fact, you can be making out with a girl and she changes her mind halfway and stops. It's her choice to do that. You, on the other hand, have to respect that, and it can go both ways. So it has nothing to do with the location, because we've heard of people who got raped in churches, in places of worship. So let's forget about the location. The third scenario is in the event whereby the victim is perceived to have enjoyed the experience. So I believe that is self-explanatory and it's definitely not an excuse. So don't get me wrong. No one is saying you shouldn't advise your children or people in general on how to steer clear of harm's way. It is an interesting finding because it does suggest that we want to be sympathetic and focus on the victim to outpour our sympathy and suggest ways to avoid such situations, but perhaps that might lead us to focus more on the victim and what they could have done, that we neglect to focus on the agencies of perpetrators and what they potentially could have done differently. But we need to understand that bad things do happen to good people too, even when they do everything right. Some people use victim blaming to reassure themselves that such things can never happen to them and people only get what they deserve, but it doesn't always work that way. Actually, a way to avoid admitting that something just as unthinkable could happen to you even when you do all that. The idea that you might be able to have control over whether you become a victim of crime makes some people have a harder time believing that victims of crime did not contribute to or bear responsibility for their own victimization. Okay guys, we've come to the end of today's video. If you like the video, kindly click on the like button, subscribe to the channel if you've not, turn on your notifications, drop a comment if you will, and with that being said, I love you, I need to wrap, and I'ma see you in the next one.